This particular segment is extremely close to my heart. And I say that because he who controls the media controls the message. And in this country, you have very few black media companies, especially black media companies that bring us news that is not of the slant of mainstream media. In this particular segment, Roland Martin is going to interview a young man who is following in potentially the footsteps of Roland Martin and trying to form a minority media company.
Prize-winning journalist Jose Antonio Vargas made headlines when he very publicly admitted to being an undocumented immigrant in an effort to put a spotlight on immigration issues. He is now turning his attention to launching a media platform aimed at reflecting the diversity of America while inspiring discussions about race at the same time. He's been using the hashtag Emerging Us, or you could say Emerging US, as Jose Antonio looks to raise $1 million in 60 days. He's already produced a few videos, including one called Dear Donald. Here's a clip.
Dear Donald Trump.
Dear Donald Trump.
Dear Donald Trump.
Dear Donald Trump. There we go. I don't know. Dear Donald Trump.
Okay, Donald.
You will not make America great again.
You've attacked Muslims,
Women.
Mexicans,
People with disabilities.
immigrants, Jews,
The blacks.
The Japs.
And Jose Antonio Vargas joins us via Skype right now from Miami. Hey, man, what's going on?
Thank you for having me.
You and I have talked about, for several years in terms of really how jacked up mainstream media is. And you know what? Let's just do this here. We're not going to call it mainstream media. We're going to call it white-dominated media because the reason being, if we say black media or Hispanic media, we're just going to call it for what it is. And the reality is, when you look at a lot of these stories out here, you have largely white executives in television stations, cable networks, newspapers, even now in digital media, and frankly, the perspectives of people of color totally missing, and the decision makers, also totally different.
Well, I'm really glad that you showed that Dear Donald Trump video from Emerging Us. The whole goal there is I actually think there's a new mainstream in America, right? We are the new mainstream in America.
Yep.
And in some ways, this is what Donald Trump and the people who support him are so scared of, right? The fact that this country is becoming less and less white, right? In Los Angeles, where I live, 72% of all women in Los Angeles are women of color. 72%. Doesn't that give the whole Oscar so white conversation a whole new different meaning, right? But for the most part, as you and I have talked about in the past, right? For the most part, American newsrooms are actually less diverse now than when I started in journalism in the late 1990s.
Yep.
I mean, that's a really, as the country gets more and more diverse, our newsrooms are getting less and less diverse.
But Jose, here's what I've said. I've said that the media is the last bastion. And the reality is, when you look at the history of this country, and that is when you're able to change the fourth estate, when you're able to change media, you now impact the images, you now impact the narrative, and so there's sort of this hardening, if you will. When you look at shows out here, you have very few people of color, black, Hispanic, Asian, who frankly are being considered for these jobs. And and it was amazing after the election of President Barack Obama. Rachel Sklar wrote a piece in the Daily Beast where she said 2009 is going to be the year of the black journalist. And she profiled all of us who were these analysts on the show. And then a year later, I hit her up and I said, what do you think happened last year? And literally it was this total step back, if you will. And we've sort of been fighting, it's amazing, trying to gain on what was lost with the election of a black president.
And to me, this is what the media is. You had mentioned who owns the media, right? I mean, I think I've been traveling this country. I've been traveling this country nonstop for the past 5 years since I outed myself as undocumented, right? Basically figuring out like what is happening in our country and how people talk about issues of immigration, right? But the media, for example, has really failed in the way it frames the conversation about immigration because there's not enough people of color, especially, for example, Latinos in news media, right? Who are actually contextualizing and reporting on this issue. Do you know in this country, the fastest growing population of undocumented immigrants are Asians, not Latinos? Right? I mean, we don't even talk about undocumented black people. There's so many undocumented Caribbeans, Africans that aren't even a part of the conversation because white media is so busy talking about Mexico and the border and building the wall and basically playing into Donald Trump.
So what is this initiative that you're launching? What is this media entity?
Until we get to own media, until we get to actually frame the conversation, nothing is going to change.
You're right.
So I've decided that guess what? I'm going to own my own media company. It's called emergingus.com, right? And we teamed up with Beacon, which is this big kind of Kickstarter for journalism to do this. And we've raised almost $200,000. Right, and Beacon is matching every single dollar we raise. This is the largest crowdfunding campaign in the history of American journalism, and our goal is to, after raising the money, is to figure out how we can even scale these even bigger and better. Right? Like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we have to build new institutions. I mean, this is why I'm so.
Oh, I agree.
This is why I really admire kind of what you've done with your career, right? And I really admire kind of what you guys are doing in terms of making sure that people of color, black people, Latinos, Asians, we are central in our own stories. I'm not a minority, right? As a person who has a very Hispanic name, who looks Asian, who majored in African American studies in college. I just made a film for MTV called White People. I'm undocumented, I'm gay. I'm not a marginalized minority, right? We're all mainstream. And I think we have to really fight to make sure that we're telling our story the way we want it to be told.
I want to go to Amber, Shamika, and Angela. And Friday we talked about the story of Michael Sam saying that he faced more racism in the gay community than he did black homophobia. Not a single cable news network has done a segment on that, even folks who are gay who are hosting shows. Right. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is because the question is who controls the content, who owns the content, right. And at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. And I'm telling you, it still cracks me up when people come up to me and they say, oh my God, I really wish you were still on CNN. And I said, yeah, but you do understand that I determine what happens on this show, who the guests are, who gets booked, things along those lines. And so, yeah, what Jose is saying, keep saying, can y'all please hire us? Can you please hire us? You know what, fine. We got to create ourselves. Yes. Angela.
So a couple things. One is, and just going back to Jose's point about the conversation, the frame around immigration. The fact that there was just a study done a little over a week ago talking about the fact that Donald Trump has received more than $2 billion in free media, what we normally call earned media, right? But he's running his own paid-for campaign, but he just got the biggest handout ever. You know how we like handouts and free stuff? He just got the biggest handout ever, and I think that speaks volumes, right? It determines, okay, well, we think that he's going to get the ratings, so they're betting on Donald Trump. They're not betting on our content. So you're asking, why doesn't it go to us? Why don't they tell our stories? They're not betting on our content. They forget that we made Empire work and Scandal work and all these other shows that are doing so well. That's our viewership. Those are our audiences. So our stories actually do get ratings.
Sure, Mike, I had a conversation a couple of days ago with Michael Steele, and he sent me an email about a young African-American who's a conservative out of Los Angeles. He said, Roland, there's no other show that has put on more black conservatives than you have.
Oh, that's interesting.
No, that's true. That is true. But again, I don't look at black conservatives like, oh my God, there are 3 of them out there. There's Michael Steele, J.C. Watts, and Joe Watkins out of Philadelphia. But again, that speaks to when you control the product, you go, no, there are more voices out here.
No, I think it's very, very important when you're talking about issues that are relevant to your community to have outlets to be able to tell those stories from your perspective. And I think many, many times in the mainstream media that's missed. And so I do think shows like yours does a great job, a great service of providing thought process for not only African Americans that are on the left, but also African Americans like myself who are more center-right leaning. And so I applaud you for that. I think it's important.
Amber, then we'll go to Jose. Amber.
Yeah, and we just had Black Lives Matter on here, and Jose was at Netroots as well. We saw an improper framing of what that action was about. So being in control, and I know a lot of folks, I'm so grateful for Roland's show as well, because it is a control of content. We're seeing people like Melissa Harris Perry off the air, and that being a conversation, regardless of what happened, we know as people who do work in progressive politics that anything can happen with our own people when it comes to the stories that they want to tell and don't want to tell. And I even, Jose's documentary, White People, I had viewing parties at my house around that because I was so shocked that somebody actually confronted and talked to white people about issues that they are a part of. And out of my own, I think it was also funny how these conversations went down. And we had a great time having a dialogue around that and recommending it to other white folks that I work with who just need to have a real conversation about race.
Jose, final comment here. I want you to talk about this, Jose, that is why it's also important for us, and whether we want to have to fund our own, and here's why. If you truly study the rise of conservative media, conservatives say, you know what, fine, ABC, NBC, CBS, okay, guys, we think you guys are massively liberal, Washington Post, New York Times, and so you have this entire infrastructure, not only talk radio, but newspapers, foundations, then of course Fox News. Now all of a sudden you look at several other networks out there, and then you look at on the digital side, that was about funding their own. What you're saying is, look, if we want it, we got to pony up and support it, and that's why you're doing the crowdsourcing.
Absolutely, and you know, and think about it this way: we've had an African American in the White House, but we haven't had an African American to edit the Washington Post, right? We've had Barack Obama, but there's not been a single black editor who's edited the New Yorker or New York Magazine or all these bastion of quote unquote mainstream American journalism. I mean, this country is so behind in how we talk about diversity. And in some ways, I think this is now a time for black journalists, Latino journalists, and Asian journalists to claim our rightful place in newsrooms. To say that, guess what? You are not covering America the way that we should be covering America. And unless you do it, this is where, to me, not only the failure of diversity and demographics, but the failure of placing these stories in a way that the greater public can understand them, right? I mean, actually, I'm so glad you mentioned white people. One of the issues we're going to cover on Emerging Us is what does it mean that white people are an emerging racial minority, which is the reality in most metropolitan areas in America.
There you go.
It's a great frame.
Again, where can the folks, where should they go to contribute?
Please go to emergingus.com. Every dollar you give is doubled. $1, $5, $10. And Roland, I really look forward, by the way, once we're up and running, to collaborating with you.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to figure we can do together.
We can do it. All right, emergingus.com.
Emergingus.com. Please.
All right, folks, I want all of y'all to do it, and so after the show, I'll go to the site and make my contribution. Jose Antonio Vargas, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
If for nothing else, hopefully this man's endeavor is going to take off and give us additional outlets where we can not just get the slant of the majority white mainstream media, but get the slant from people like Roland Martin and Mr. Vargas. And you know, I haven't seen any Asian people trying to push this yet, but to get their take on things as well. Because the more takes you get, the more informed you are, the better at decision making you will be.